Welcome to Dare to Speak, difficult conversations that can change everything. This is a place for you to bring those difficult conversations that you've been mulling over, that you've been thinking about while you've been walking around, doing the washing up or commuting to work. I'm Eve Stanway. I am a philosopher, psychotherapist of 25 years, divorce and breakup coach, and I help people in the moments where there's a difficult conversation they just don't know how to handle. This is a moment, your moment, to pause, reflect, and have a bit of breathing space to think about what matters to you and how to tackle those difficult moments. Using insight, reflection, case studies, and examples, I will guide you through those difficult conversations in a safe and constructive way. So let's begin. Hello and welcome to this episode of Dare to Speak, difficult conversations that change everything. Today I am delighted to welcome my guest, Laura McCoy. I met Laura a couple of months ago now and we had a fantastic chat. It's great, Laura, to have you here on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it.
No, you're so welcome. You are. And Laura's coming in from, where are you coming in from again?
St. Peters, Missouri. It's about 30 minutes outside of St. Louis.
Fantastic. And that is the real power of Zoom, and it's the real power of podcasts that we can connect over such a long distance. Can you tell the listeners, Laura, a little bit about what you do?
So I created Daddy Don't Go as a way to get the word out and bring awareness to the impact of fatherlessness on our culture. We have a huge problem in the States with dads being absent, and the result of that is a lot of our kids are running off the rails, and there's a lot of mental health issues. And I'm not saying that every dad needs to be involved, because sometimes they don't. They might not be the best dads, but for the most part we're suffering because our dads are not involved in families. And I was a, quote, fatherless daughter. My parents were divorced. My dad lived far away. I lived with him in the summers, but he was not present for me during that time. He was very disconnected. And so, and when I wasn't with him, we were not really connecting. So I saw the impact of that on my life, and I decided I really want to put that out there. It started off as just of daughters of divorce, and it has morphed into a book and workshops and all kinds of other things. So it's really exciting to see it have some momentum.
Yeah. And I was actually raised, when my parents got divorced when I was young, I was raised by my dad and I didn't have my mother there. And I think there's something really important in what you've said there, that the parent who is absent, I think maybe partly because they're not part of the daily life of their child, they become disconnected and misaligned actually in some ways. And it almost makes it's easy to blame the parent who is away, but it becomes that without being able to make that connection, and certainly not being able to connect with your own child, is really complicated and not spoken about enough. For you, what do you mind just sharing a little bit about you've mentioned what you've set up, but what drove you to do it? What was it particularly that you saw or that you heard, or what conversations you had that made you think, I'm actually going to do something about this? Because you've done a lot and you are doing a lot about this.
Well, mostly for me, it was personally seeing the self-destruction in my life and the bad decisions that I was making, and connecting those things to the fact that I had that void in my soul from not having my dad and having his attention. But also, I worked with a lot of kids over the years in grade school and at my church, and I saw the impact that was having on mostly girls, but boys too. Just that absence, and how it writes on your heart in a way that makes you either, pick up some really bad habits, or it just interferes with what I consider to be normal development, because we're supposed to have a mother and a father, and those two yin yang things that are happening with us, so that we can balance our self-image through them. And when you have that one piece missing, then there's a piece missing in you. And I really believe that. So
I agree with that. And I think I've seen over the years that there's a lot of grief that goes along with that. There's the grief of the family you didn't have, the grief of the parent that you didn't have. And that on, the grief cycle for listeners who aren't maybe aware of the grieving process, there's different stages of the grieving process. So there's anger and there's denial and there's kind of bargaining. If only this, then that. There's real sadness and there's acceptance. And then it goes round. It isn't kind of 5 steps and you're out the door. It goes back, it circles around. So, as a child growing up with that grief and that loss, that I think, from my point of view, that's part of what causes this numbness in adulthood that then leads to us not being able to really listen to our own intuition and our own feelings.
it's
Would you
true. And
would
my
you say
mother,
that?
my goodness, my mother was, she was mother and father and did so many things. She was
Mm,
an absolutely and continues to be a
mm,
wonderful mother, trying to fill that void, but there's still, it's something coming from the dad. I can
mm,
remember several times coming up where I just wanted him to see me. I just
mm.
wanted to be seen by him. I would I had this perfectionism thing going on the outside,
Yeah.
but the inside of me was this, boiling cauldron. And so
Mm,
I think that just that absence, that disconnect, and also feeling like everyone else has what you don't have.
yeah.
When my parents divorced, it wasn't as big of a deal. It wasn't as big of
Mm,
a thing. Not everybody was missing a parent,
yeah.
but now it seems like people are divorced. If you're not divorced, you have something's, different with you because
Well,
most kids are jumping between family to family.
so there's a statistic. I don't know what the statistic is in the States, but in the UK, half of children reach the age of 18. And by that time, they don't have one or other parent living with
Yeah.
them, or they're in a split home. Now, that is half. That's such a significant number of children who are navigating sole parenting, i.e., a parent who's only one parent. I don't think that dads, men, are being taught how much their presence matters. That having a father or having a mother, if you don't happen to have your mother, but we're talking about dads, for men to hear as a father, your ability to spend time with your child, to want to spend time, to be curious about your child and their internal world and what they're doing, not to be performative as what they call a Disney dad who, takes you out and gets you meals and buys you gifts, but one that is interested in their own child. I don't know what you think, but I don't feel the messaging is getting out to men how much that really does matter to child development.
I am very hopeful because I am seeing a shift
Yeah.
especially we have a lot of new little families in our subdivision, and the men are just as they are right there with those kids
Yeah.
doing everything. And I'm talking about 30 something
Mm.
parents right now.
Yeah.
So I think that we're beginning to see a shift, but what you said about Disney dads is so true. It is so true that I think a lot of times dads say, I just have the weekend, so we got to do something big, when really
Mm.
all those kids want is for you to sit with them and play a game, or ask them about their day, get
Yeah.
connected to who they are, or even tell
Yeah.
them stories about yourself. Say, when
Yeah.
I was your age, so that they know that you can relate to them, what's going on with
Mm.
them right now. It's critical.
I do think it's crucial. And I know as I work a lot with men, and it's actually very difficult for men sometimes if they're not in the home anymore. They might have to be traveling to see their kids. So therefore, it becomes the natural thing. Oh, we'll go for a meal, or we'll go to the cinema, or we'll go to the park. And working out how to have that lived experience with the child where you can be doing nothing with the kid apart from maybe playing a game of cards or just sitting, or the child, and this is I see very, very crucial because I've had people talk about this, watching their dad do stuff. For example, I'm going to be very kind of generic about this, but putting up shelves or mowing the lawn or fixing the car or stuff like that, painting the house, how important it is to see for children to see men doing those roles.
And being involved in their communities, doing things in their
Yeah,
communities.
definitely.
It's unfortunate because legislatively, this country in the
Mm,
60s, that was kind of when, things started shifting where for whatever reason we decided that men weren't really necessary and we almost started encouraging single mothers
yeah.
as a rule, and that was a huge mistake for our
Mm,
culture, I think. But yeah, because I can remember that even with my dad, the few times you'd have a deeper conversation, it was usually around something that he was trying to impart a skill, a life skill. And we
yeah.
need those things too.
Mm,
What I
I
noticed
completely
is
agree.
you a lot of times we turn things off. Like I didn't become what I would consider to be sentimental until
Mm,
later in my life because there was a lot of denial of I didn't want to rock the boat. I wanted everybody to
yeah.
be happy, whatever that took. And I think that dads, as much as you think the dad's the tough guy, a lot of times he gives the child permission to be vulnerable and soft because he's taking care of everything. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. No,
There's a
I do really agree with you about that. And I think that that masculine role of, well, I can hold, think about the dad holding the baby up so that the baby feels like it's flying,
yes,
having the strength to lift the child up. And so the kid can have their arms out pretending that they're flying, because that's the safety of the strength holding you up so that you can then pretend that you can fly.
exactly.
Which often causes for women quite a lot of anxiety when they see men doing stuff like that. But the doing of stuff like that safely, but doing it safely is really part of teaching a child that they're safe and that they're held.
They need a little roughhousing. Girls and boys need a little
Yeah,
roughhousing, and
I agree.
women are not wired to do that. And so men have that, gift. And you know where your boundaries are. There's a point in time where you can
Yeah.
set those boundaries, but we need a little bit of that. And just that affirmation of their role and your role living in different places. My dad
Mm,
moved almost every year. When we went to stay with him, it was a new house every time.
mm,
And there's something that I think gets lost, and that is the impact on the child of all of that back and forth. Because
yeah.
as much as my parents tried really hard to make
Mm,
it, a safe place, a welcoming place, it's so awful to have to pack your stuff up, go with them, come back and do that,
totally.
especially if you're talking about kids who do it weekly and different rules, different.
I could not agree more. And I think I've been looking actually, and I haven't been able to find any good studies on this. We're definitely seeing a rise in childhood anxiety, childhood sadness, a rise in neurodivergence, which ADHD and autism, one way or another, there's always a component of childhood trauma somewhere. And the actual impact of having to remember your stuff to move from place to place is really difficult. It's very, very complicated.
They're not supposed to do that when they're little kids. That's
They're
not their
not.
job. And and so I mean you can try as hard as you want to make it
Mm,
comfortable. I have a story in my book about my little blanket. I had this little
yeah.
blanket and my dad just did not want me to have that. It was really shredded. But I mean, even all these things that we're talking about, one of the biggest goals for me is to really emphasize the fact that yes, that happened to me. That's how my childhood was, but
Mm,
I'm not wallowing in that. I want to learn how it impacted me,
yeah.
move forward, and try to do something else with my life because you can sit and
Mm,
say, oh, my parents were divorced and you can say
mm,
all of that, but that's not who you are right now. You get to do what you have, take what you have and decide what you want to do with that. I don't think, even in the best of circumstances, it's ever going to be this beautiful thing when someone gets divorced,
no.
even because it just can't be. Those littles are struggling with their own things, and then you add all of this to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And I think this is a difficult conversation in and of itself, because I'm just going to pause for a second. I'm going to have to edit this, but just hold on one sec. So I think the difficult conversation around, I think a lot of parents are aware that it's problematic for their children to move from space to space, and it causes a lot of anxiety. The reality is we grow up and we get on with it, and we might have some therapy or some coaching that we need to do. We might have some reflection. We might have to kind of learn how to let feelings come back in to our lives because we've learned to block and numb things out. I think part of the reason for talking about this, and I'm going to guess this is part of the work that you do, is just looking at the frame of that so that we're understanding that if we can understand this framework of the need of both parents and the need of that dad role as well as the mum, rather than seeing them as in conflict with each other almost, because I think
Agreed.
that's what it's like the battle of the sexes means that there has to be conflict between the mum and the dad, as if I know what's right for my kids, you don't know what's right because you do it differently and I'm the only one who knows. But the
Yes.
truth is, what if we both have a part to play? And I'm not talking about really difficult or abusive parents. I am talking about the vast majority of dads and mums who are literally trying to do the right thing but just need a bit of extra support.
Right. We can't live together. We can't live together.
Yeah.
How about check in with the child and say, how's it going? How are you navigating? Have you noticed anything like in your stomach? Are you, checking in with those things with the kids?
Mm.
So important. I
Yeah.
had the absolute gift of both of my parents never spoke poorly about one another
Mm.
to me.
Yeah.
If I was with my mom, she would, and I know there were times when she was very angry and upset, but she did not transfer that to me, and nor did my dad. And
Yeah.
that was a gift. Now, as I got to
Mm.
be an adult, I began to hear some stories, but
Yeah.
they spared us from that, and I'm so grateful for that.
I think that that's a really important message actually for couples who are raising their children together. The way we talk about the child's other parent is really, really important. It's very usual that we all got different views and different opinions and different outlooks and different ways of doing things. The way that we navigate that in for our children is really, really important.
Right. Even in a marriage that they're together,
Yeah. Yeah,
parents
exactly.
can fall into those patterns of talking to the kids about the other parent, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
not a good thing to do.
Yeah. Or your dad's so lazy. And instead of saying, well, your dad is operating on different priorities that I don't agree with, here's what we'll do, making
Mhm.
it into a conversation. So, Laura, I know you've got an event coming up, and I do want to talk about it because I know it's all the way over on the other side of the Atlantic. But I think it's a really important event to let people know because you're creating a space for a whole load of really quite difficult and challenging conversations here. Can you tell everybody a bit about what you're doing?
I could not be more excited about this.
I
I am
know
so
that you are.
excited. So, on July the 22nd in Westport,
Mm,
we're going to gather 96 people, which will be 12 tables of 8 people, and we're going to have topic-driven conversations that are going to be directed at solutions that we can take back to our circles of influence. So we've got people coming from St. Louis and then some suburbs and, some out in
mm,
the country, all different mindsets, teachers, social workers, first
yeah,
responders, big group of
mm,
people because all of these things, all of the issues from fatherlessness spill over into the classroom, law enforcement, health care,
mm,
all of those things, they spill over and you don't see that is the issue until later, maybe down the road.
mm,
So I'm so excited about that. It's just going to be a morning. It'll be 3 hours, three
mm,
hours or so of us talking, taking some breaks, and we'll have a couple of quick speakers, little snack, sit and have a conversation and then
yeah,
go home. But hopefully it will spur some things
mm,
for other people to think about in terms of how even the curriculum we have at school, how does that
yeah,
impact? Because some of these kids are so overloaded with homework at the end of the day.
mm,
And if you have shared custody, one of the parents has to make sure that child's getting the homework done, and I've only got you for 2 days, and you
mm.
know, it creates a lot of issues. So that's just one of hundreds
Yeah,
of things.
and I think that that's something I see a lot. We children in this country also have a lot of homework, and the reality is, the chances are there is one parent who is better at math or better at English than the other one, but there's also one parent who is better at homework than the other. We've all had different schooling. Some of us love school, some of us hated school, some of us are dyslexic, some of us aren't. And it becomes another point of conflict that the child is the one that has to navigate in the end.
Right.
And I've seen children who know that one of their parents, they save up the homework for when they see their dad because they know that he's particularly good at the homework. They're trying to
Right.
protect the mum, or
Right.
they lie about homework and then they get accused of lying because they're not saying that they've got homework. Actually, they don't want to do the homework with the dad because the dad gets really frustrated by it because math is done differently than when he did it. That's the biggest one I hear,
Yes.
because learning has moved.
Mhm.
And then you've got volunteering and putting back in society and how people view that.
Right.
And whether or not that's a waste of time because you should spend more time with your kids rather than it being, you putting back something in society. So there's a whole load
Agreed.
of complexities here, aren't there?
Right. And crime rates among fatherless kids are tremendously high. So, I've talked to several police officers who all say, if I were to survey, I would bet at least 90% of the bad kids, the repeat offenders that keep, no kid is really bad. Take that back.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
kids who are
yeah,
making bad choices,
yeah,
the repeat offenders are typically in, if you want to call them broken homes, the dad is
yeah,
not part
yeah,
of the picture, or they've never ever met their dad. They've just
yeah,
never met him. And
yeah.
that's not okay, you know?
No, no, it isn't. It really isn't okay. Growing up without a parent is a significant loss in childhood.
Hmm.
The impact is enormous. Children raised over such a long period of time. The loss of a dad, my dad was a really difficult man. He did raise me and my brother from the age of 7. He was outlandish. He took me out of school to kind of look after the home when I was 12, but still expected me to reach top academia. I don't think he ever really had a realistic view of who I was or what I was. I was to some extent what he needed me to be because he needed me to help him out, really. I was properly parentified. However, and he passed very recently, my dad. And it's only after he's kind of no longer here on the planet that I can begin to see the value that I got from him.
Yeah.
Even though I learned so much through arguing with him, I learned so much by being with him. And I am grateful for that. I'm grateful that I had a dad,
Yeah. Yeah, I did a lot
you
of
know.
repairs with my dad in the last 5 or so years of his life. I'm so grateful for that time because I just sat down and had the difficult conversation one day, and we were able to come together. And if he had gone and I hadn't had that experience, I don't know what I would have done because,
How may I ask, sorry if it's okay with you, but how did you bring that about and how did you counter? Because I can imagine there being resistance, or do you think because he had reached that age there wasn't? Like how did you actually do that? Because it's a lot of people say, well, I had that reconciling conversation. I mean, I had one of those with my dad as well. And actually landing that conversation and getting my dad to engage was really hard to
yeah,
get him
it
to
is.
do it. What was it
Well,
like for you? Was it
it
difficult?
was more me. I write about it in the book. It's almost as if I can go back there in perfect memory because it had that
Wow.
much impact on me. I was, at the time I lived in Missouri, he lived in Florida. I was
Mm,
holding my little baby in my arms, and all I could think was, how did he just walk away? How did he just leave us? How could
yeah.
he look at us and not want to stay and fight for us? And so I called my stepmother, who, by the way, is one of my best friends to this day. She's a
Yeah. Oh,
delightful person. I love her so much, which is not usual either. That's not
mm,
typical.
yeah.
And I told her I was coming. She made a space for us to talk. And I said, I need to talk to you about, and what I want to know is if you want to be part of this child's life, because
Mm,
I would like for my son to have a grandfather, and I don't
yeah.
feel close to you. And his first reaction was to blow. I mean, he got very, very
Really?
defensive at first, going to my mom and all the issues, blah, blah. And I let him do that. And then I said, okay, can I talk now? And
Mm,
looked at me, and it was almost as if that was the first time he saw me as an adult. He looked
wow.
me in my eyes, and he was just taken, and he started crying. And he said it was easier for me to pretend like you weren't there. It was just easier for me to do that. And I'm sorry. I'm goosebumpy. It's been a long, long time. It's been 37 years. And that was the moment that I said, Dad, you're not going to be daddy to me. We've missed that part. But we can at least try to create a friendship and be connected. So then I started calling him for his advice on
Yeah.
things that I really didn't need advice on.
Yeah.
And he would start talking because he was, getting what he needed. And we had some really wonderful times. He came to visit me a couple times. I went to visit him. And it was such a blessing to have that because
Mm.
I don't know what I'd do if I left this earth and not ever said that to him, or that my boys never, and they never really got to know him,
Yeah.
but they got to know him a little bit. They went to visit him with me and things. So yeah, it was good.
That's so, I I hope anybody listening to this kind of hears that and takes heart, because there's an awful lot in the culture at the moment about kind of, you know, parental estrangement. And I will admit that my own father ended up on the naughty step for a number of years, where I had very little contact with him when his behavior was difficult. And it's such a personal thing. There is a view, but if you don't reconcile with your parents, you'll regret it. What you're talking about is reconnecting, but not somehow trying to whitewash history and say everything was
Exactly.
perfect. So I
Exactly.
think,
He's a broken man. And so am I.
yeah,
I'm a broken person. I want everybody to forgive everything I do, but I'm not willing to. I'm going to stand there and to say,
yeah,
I don't have any idea what his experience was like back then. And I can say when he left this earth, I loved my dad.
yeah.
I never did not love him because he was doing what he could do. And I have to realize that,
I, I hear you on that, and I feel the same about my dad. I feel he was, what I realized when he passed is this is what drives me to work with men, because I know that if my dad had had the kind of help that I actually know how to give people now, and he'd had the kind of understanding, I think he would have been much more the dad that I know he wanted to be. I think in his
right?
head, and I'm sure your dad was the same, he picked the only route that looked like the only route available to him, because
Yes.
truthfully there was very few other routes available. And it's very easy to kind of judge. And I do really, really wish my dad had got help. I wish things had been different. I really do.
Me
But I
too.
also can see that it's a complicated thing. But what I definitely think isn't good is when people say, but I've got to kind of whitewash and pretend the hurt didn't happen. Because
No.
what you just said now is really powerful. I'm not going to call you daddy, because you're not that. That role's gone. It's in the
Mhm.
past. It's unavailable. But us as two human beings, and you potentially as granddad, maybe that could be,
Yeah.
because for your sons, that's their heritage that they're going to remember when they're a father and a grandfather and so forth. And that's
Right. And he's a
what you
brilliant
did.
man. Certain things that I did not know until my dad died, that he taught dancing. He was a
Whoa.
dance teacher.
Wow.
He could have taught my children to dance. He could have taught I can't dance. And, he could have
Yeah.
passed that on. It broke my heart because I
Yeah.
said that would be a thing we could have done, but
Oh,
he just didn't know how to do that.
you
And
didn't
he had so much of his own. He had his demons and he was trying to make, you know, create a business and do all those things.
know.
I have so much grace for him now. I
Yeah, I
really
think
do.
I just hope that people hearing this understand that this is reaching that point of calm and containment, but with your eyes open without trying to
Mhm.
pretend something isn't what it is. That's where that personal grace comes in. So, Laura, thank you. I just thank you so much with all my heart for sharing what you've shared and for being so honest, and also for what you're doing on the 22nd, because what impressed me the very, very first time I spoke to you is that you are using the experiences that life has given you in order to try and leave something better. And I just commend you for that.
Yes. We can't.
I
What
really
choice do I
do.
have? I could wallow. I'm not a wallower.
You're definitely not a wallower, that's for sure. Before we go, are there any kind of words of wisdom that you would say? I always think with this podcast, I'm always thinking that there might be one person who's listening to it, whose life might they might think about things slightly differently. Is there any words of wisdom that you would leave with anyone?
Honestly, I think that really the work you're doing needs to be done with every man, not just men who are divorcing their children. Because, even among my generation, you see men who they take their emotions and turn it into anger instead of, we need to teach our boys how to name how they feel and understand how they feel so that they can be strong dads and strong partners. And I think that's one of the most important things. And if your marriage dissolves and you have custody of your children, I think one of the biggest things is to just help them know you and help them, figure out who they are through you. Because
Yeah.
you have a lot to give them, to pass on to them. Don't think it's just about, making some mac and cheese and taking them to the park. We need to make sure that they know me.
Yeah.
They know
Yeah.
where their heritage is and
I couldn't agree with you more. And it's the stories. When my father passed away, when I spoke to him, I interviewed him before he passed. I learned things about him. You learned things about your dad. And we really want people to learn this stuff while the person is still alive, which
yeah.
means share your stories. Your children are listening, they are paying attention, and they also need to hear the stories many, many times over. They
Well,
really,
and when
really
they're
do.
13, they may say, "Oh, Dad, you've told me that already," but trust me, they want to hear it. And that's a way you can connect with them that's so deep and so rich.
Yeah.
So,
I completely agree with that. Laura, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real
thank
delight
you.
speaking with you. If anybody did want to contact you or connect with you, because I have a lot of listeners in the States as well as all the way around the world, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
My email is laura@daddydon'tgo.net. So it's LAURA at daddydon'tgo without an apostrophe
Mm.
all together.net.
Perfect.
That's the
Excellent.
best way.
And all of the details to connect with you as well will be in the show notes. So anybody who's listening to this who wants to connect up with Laura, do reach out. If you can't for any reason, message me directly. I'm available and I will put you in touch. But Laura, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate having you here.
Thank you for having me. I so appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome.